Good evening. You're joining us at HydePark on AdaDerana 24. What will be the formation of the new government? How will be the outlook for Sri Lanka in terms of economics, politics and international relations? We have invited to our studios a veteran politician, a prominent face in the SLFP, SLPP coalition, former Minister Susil Premajayantha, Colombo district candidate for the SLPP. You played a prominent role in the SLFP, SLPP marriage. Let me start off asking you, what's the outlook for the two parties and the coalition?
Now, of course, SLPP founded somewhere around 2018, just before the last local government elections. Most of the SLPP members are SLFPs earlier, but unfortunately the SLFP leadership decided to have a coalition government after last general election. So as a result of a session of the then SLFP members of parliament did not join that government, coalition government at that time, and they were in the opposition as a separate group. So later on they were instrumental to found the SLPP. So it means that almost the policies are, you don't see much difference. But only issue is the SLFP section of the SLFP and the leadership decided to join the government, coalition government. That was the main reason.
But when you say there is no change or difference in policy, are you satisfied with the fact that the SLFP will no longer be as important as a new party as SLPP going forward?
Yeah, you find so many after certain period of time, of course, you find new parties, emerging new parties. So that was the necessity at that time and even today. So that is why the SLPP, the founded by former Minister Basil Rajapaksa, and now the leader of the SLPP is former President and the present Prime Minister, Mahinda Rajapaksa, a veteran politician.
You were the General Secretary for the UPFA since its formation, since mid-2015, but now our political coalitions, alliances seem to be taking new faces, new forms. What will be the outlook after the general election in your view? Of course, you'd want the SLPP to come to power, but then there are so many alliances and coalitions. Even when we talk about the UNP, there's Samagi Jana Balawega, UNP, even if they come to power, they need to strike a deal there. And even if your party does, there is so much of differences and a lot of parties involved here.
Yeah, at the moment, of course, you can see the oldest political party in the country at the moment, the UNP is divided, and then section of UNP now contesting under separate manner. Samagi Jana Balawega, the symbol is telephone, and the original UNP headed by former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe contesting under the symbol of elephant. So then you find the two different factions then criticizing each other in two camps. So therefore, as a result, of course, the most of their party cadres, especially at grassroots levels, of course, they are in a very desperate situation. So I think none of these two factions will be able to capture power.
Isn't there a tug of war, isn't there a division in ideology between the SLFP and SLPP? Although you say most of the policies are the same.
Most of the policies, now for an example, the foreign policy, and then the investments, and then the signing of international agreements was the same during SLFP, founded by late Prime Minister W.R.D. Bandaranaike, together with leaders like D.A. Rajapaksa, the father of present President and the present Prime Minister. So it shows that how it's the affiliation towards SLFP. So unfortunately, after last general election, so then the leader of the SLFP made such decisions, and then as a result, of course, SLFP lost the local government elections, and especially the parliamentarians, most of the parliamentarians joined SLPP. Now SLPP is the strongest party in the country.
Which means, as you say, after this election, there will be no SLFP?
There can be a few members of SLFP, but they are also contesting under Podujana or the SLPP. So they are under the signature of SLPP General Secretary.
We'll like to talk a little about the policy framework that a future SLFP, SLPP government or SLPP government would be looking at. You said in terms of international agreements to other policies, you are on the same page. But what of international agreements? We are talking a lot about the MCC. When previously, before the presidential election, there was talk about the agreement being torn apart and, you know, put to trash, and now there is renewed discussion about it, and we see that the UNP and the Jana Balavega in unison criticizing your camp.
Actually, the MCC agreement originated from a decade ago. So it's not suddenly came up at this juncture or during the previous regime. This MCC means Millennium Challenge Corporation. That is, of course, the grant given by USA to their friendly countries for some purpose. But in return, of course, there can be some hidden agendas, right? So it was proposed originally when Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe was the Prime Minister during 2001 to 2004. Then, of course, he lost. Then it was under the carpet. And again, after they came into power after last general election, again they pursue the other party to go for this kind of agreement. But in this particular agreement, you find three sections. That is, one is to allocate some funds in US dollars, that is to ease the traffic congestion in the Colombo city. So then you find, like in Bangkok and other countries, you find the roads on towers. Then you can ease the traffic congestion in the Colombo city. That is one. Then the other one is to construct a new highway from Trincomalee to Colombo. That is highway. Then the number three is, then there will be a corridor of the reservation of the land, vast area like 12,000 acres, and this will be under a special law, a separate portion of the country. So like now you find in free trade
which will
zones,
not come under the jurisdiction of the Sri Lankan government.
Sri Lankan government, but the special law applicable to that particular area. Like free trade zones, so you find what do you mean by free? Free means tax free. Then the free of the laws applying in other parts of the country, especially the labor law, does not apply in free trade zones. Like that, of course, in this particular land area. So normal land law of the country or the criminal law does not apply to the activities in this particular land. So that is why most of the people, especially the patriotic organizations in the country, vehemently oppose the MCC agreement. But after having so many discussions in the government rank at that time, they approved the cabinet, the MCC agreement was originally approved by the then government, the latter part of their governance.
What is the stance of your camp at present?
Now, our camp, of course, now, since this international agreement between two countries, and then since the cabinet approved this agreement, original agreement, then of course after his election, the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa came into power after 16th of November last year. He appointed the cabinet appointed a committee comprising some specialists in that particular area, economists and all that. They went through it in detail, and then they submitted the interim report earlier and then final report recently. Now it is under review of the cabinet. So then I think we are heading for general election on 5th of August. So there are no time for the present cabinet to go into the details of that report. So most probably after 5th of August, there will be new government and new cabinet. So it is up to them to consider the facts mentioned in the report.
But if you come to power, if the SLPP comes to power, will this agreement be taken up favourably, or will it?
At the moment, of course, the Honourable Prime Minister has expressed his views. Most probably it won't.
Most probably it won't. Well, we'll take a short break here at Hyde Park. We'll return with more. Welcome back. You're joining us at Hyde Park, and we're in discussion with former Minister and Colombo district candidate for the SLPP, Susil Premajayantha. You were a former Minister for Science, Technology Research, Environmental and Renewable Technology, Petroleum Industries, Education, Power and Energy, and also the State Minister for International Cooperation. So we'll have a wide range of topics to talk about in terms of policy. What will be the key policy changes that a future SLPP government looks at as a senior politician in the camp? After the formation of new government after 5th of August, so now we are in a different situation when you compare the post-COVID situation and prior to that. Because after January, February of this year, so entire world is now suffering from this epidemic. 212 countries and in zones are affected. And you find over 6 million people according to the statistics, but we don't know, it must be very much higher than the numbers that we are talking at the moment. So, and the deaths, even the death rates also. But unfortunately, as a country under the leadership of His Excellency the President and the Prime Minister, we manage this epidemic at the moment. So then you find different scenario. Entire world is economy is in a recession now. Some economists have predicted that this recession is worse than the recession we experienced in the year 2008 internationally. So now the countries with sound economies like United States, UK, then Germany, France, then Russia, Japan, all these countries badly affected. So they are not in a position to help even the neighboring countries economically, but sometimes maybe in the field of health, but not economically, because all these countries are suffering at the moment, and in their respective central banks, now they are making arrangements to pump money to the banks, commercial banks, and through banks to entrepreneurs and the investors. But we don't know how far we can do that. But first of all, it is the duty of every government to control the epidemic. Without controlling this, of course, it is very difficult to have your normal day-to-day life. So therefore, it is very important to control this epidemic. So as a country, of course, smaller country with small economy, and then country suffered even the last year after the attack on Easter Sunday, right? So this is of course a double barrel attack now. It means that we suffered that. Now see, there are 4 key areas that we are earning foreign exchange.
One is our exports, especially the garments, to EU, UK and USA. All this EU, UK and US, the badly affected countries. Then you find our migrant workers,
remittances
that flow into the country. It was about 2 years ago, somewhere around 7.5 billion US dollars. Now it declining to 6.2 billion US dollars. Now some of our expatriates, they are trying to come back to the country. There are about 35,000-40,000 are waiting for their turn to come back. Then you find our other exports, except the garments, you find the tea, then the tea, rubber, coconut, and then the spices and all that, minor crops and all that, of course. And then gem industry. So gem export to China and all that. That is also now declining, right? Then the tourism, the zero. So roughly about 400,000 to 650,000 people engage in the tourism sector. Some people, they have finance, their vehicles and all that, and then they are not in a position to pay their installments properly. So this is the situation at the moment. So therefore, we are in a situation where we are not getting much foreign remittances or earnings, of course. Then on the other hand, you have to pay for oil, then the medicine, then the fertilizer and milk food, infant milk food especially. So even before the COVID-19 affected to the world and even Sri Lanka, of course, the trade deficit is somewhere around 9 to 10 billion US dollars. If we don't control our imports and if we don't have our production sufficient to meet the demand in the country, so then of course we have to outflow of foreign exchanges much more. So we won't be able to bridge this gap. So therefore we have to minimize our imports and we have to increase our, say, food items like rice and the vegetables, fruits and all that to meet the local demand. So then we need not import food items. But anyway, we have to import this oil. Since it's gone down from 120 from 85 to 22 at the moment US dollars per barrel, right? The consumption is less than the earlier. So then even you tax, you don't get the same revenue. But on the other hand, you have to pay the salaries for public servants and the pensioners, and then maintain the public service like health service, education and other services. We are not earning in a cent. And first quarter we are not getting their targeted income tax revenue, because most of the business people, the small and medium term businesses, also not in that sound condition.
Even if we cut down on our imports, have restrictions on our imports, there is a mandatory expenditure there that the government will have to bear.
These items.
And also elections, a massive burden on government coffers at this time. But of course, we have to have a parliament running. I'd like to ask you, as the former Minister of Science, Technology and Research, how can we have our policy direction in that area, especially to spur that kind of production, improve that industry, the capacity of industries, in order to not just, because our agriculture sector also has not been revived, although we have been talking about it. And although these are challenging times, there is new policy that is needed. But what are these policy directives?
Yeah, this is a good question you posed to me, because when we prepared the Saubhagya Ratma, the policy statement of His Excellency the President, presented to the country during our presidential campaign, of course. When we drafted that, we considered all these aspects. We didn't know that we are facing for this COVID-19 situation. But even at that time, we were talking about how we are going to introduce new policies That is to, by using our natural mineral resources and then adding value with the technical know-how, right? Then how we are going to increase our foreign exchange. Now see, for an example, graphite. We are producing the world's best graphite, right? Now with the application of nanotechnology, so this is converted to graphene, right? So then ilmenite, pulmude, we export over 70,000 metric tons to other countries as it is. If we convert this by using nanotechnology, then you get titanium dioxide. Then of course quartz, right? So we export as it is with small chips. Then we import the chip for your cell phone and all that, right? Then silica, clay, like that. Of course, all our natural resources like minerals, of course, we export as it is. If we add value to this graphene, of course, graphite, 1 kilo, say for an example, 1 kilo of graphite, say $10 US. If you add value, then you get 15,000 times of this $10. Like that, of course, we can add value and then we can improve our foreign exchange remittances by applying new or emerging technologies to these natural resources. So then it won't take much time. So most of the research completed by now. Now Slpp started by His Excellency the President Mahinda Rajapaksa somewhere around 2014. Now you find over 30 PhD scientists, Sri Lankan scientists who came from other countries, but otherwise they didn't have any opportunity here. Like that, of course, we can start the biotechnology laboratory. So if unfortunately we don't have that laboratory at the moment, but when I was the minister, with the help of scientists, we prepared the blueprint of biotechnology laboratory. Then we would have done 100,000 PCR tests a day. Right now we are talking about 2,000, 5,000, like that, of course.
But also
that is 3-4 years ago.
Our investments into research is quite minimal compared to the percentage to GDP.
That is, of course, very good question. Of the now actually our contribution towards research is 0.11. But countries like Israel, they spend 4%, and Japan 2 to 4%. South Korea somewhere around 3 to 4%, like that. Then you find, so as a result of all this research, of course, they introduce the new products to the international market. Now see Samsung.
But we are unable to do that.
We are unable to do that because our private sector is also not in a position to invest in research. So it is the duty of the government to initiate this research culture in the country. Then you find so many scientists, you find Sri Lankans are serving in other countries as researchers. So we can call them. So I made arrangements to get their support. 6 eminent scientists from all over the places to Sri Lanka. They were ready to come here with 2 years sabbatical leave and help us to set up all these new laboratories. This is once we set up these laboratories, not only these minerals converting to new items by using the technology. Then if we start the manufacturing of medicine, is another area. So now for an example, we were talking about Singapore as a financial hub, but 10 years ago they spent over $10 billion and started all these laboratories and allow investors to come there and start drugs manufacturing companies. So their population is somewhere around 4 to 5 million.
I'd like to speak more on this, but we'll have to take a short break at Hyde Park. To stay with us. You're joining us again at Hyde Park. We were talking about investments into research and development. Again, about drugs, medicinal drugs. We see India, Bangladesh, Pakistan heavily invested in these. But a country as Sri Lanka, with so much of education, advancements in education, technology, we lag in this area. But research and development, you said, Minister, that you've been talking to top Sri Lankan scientists, researchers to bring them back, but they too need incentives in terms of a return to Sri Lanka. But then again, are we ready as a government to make necessary allocations into research and development if we want a proper outcome of it?
Yeah, of course. Now we can convince the investors that they are getting the return of their investments, especially at this juncture. Now, see, for an example, when we originally introduced the quarantine curfew in our country, somewhere around mid-March, somewhere around 18th, 19th, 20th March, and it continued 2 months, especially in Colombo, Kalutra and Gampaha. So what was the priority of the people? The medicine, right? So they were at in large numbers near pharmacies, except after 2-3 weeks the liquor shops and all that. But the medicine, the priority, right? Then you see how importance of manufacturing drugs here. So as you said, of course, there are eminent scientists who engage with all this. Now, see, for an example, Professor Malik Ranasinghe, attached to the University of Hong Kong, is the person who invented the vaccine for SARS virus. Of course, he made some comment on this epidemic also. He said, of course, it will take at least 1 year to invent a vaccine for this epidemic. Like that, of course, then you find so many Sri Lankan professors, scientists who are serving in other countries, USA, UK, Canada, all over the places. Because I met them when I organized the STS forum in Sri Lanka. I invited over 100 Sri Lankan eminent scientists to Sri Lanka, together with our local, our scientists, over 700. We had 3 days, 26 sessions. So we discussed all these things, and then I prepared a blueprint. So then we used it when we prepare the Saubhagya Dakma, and I contributed. So therefore it is in the Saubhagya Dakma, nothing new. So only thing is you need people who has some knowledge about these policies, and you must give them the responsibility to implement it together with scientists and others. Resources, of course, you can find resources once you introduce a mineral policy in the country. So then you are not allowed to export all these minerals as it is. So the investors naturally they have to come here and invest here. So they need to fight.
But in terms of policy continuation, policy consistency, we see that Sri Lanka has struggled here. Government after government continues to bring in new policies according to their manifesto, but somehow a national policy framework, a coherent policy framework has been lacking also. This has deterred investors. This has discouraged investors. You were talking about new investments that are needed in order to add value. Even when we talk about tea, we speak about value addition, but still the industry itself has challenges because they need support from the state, they need a lot of policies, but this is an area that any future government will have to look in. But what will the SLPP do here?
Yeah, now for last many years, of course, we are not invested in research. As the Minister in charge of Science, Technology and Research, of course, I had to allocate some funds for universities to have their annual research symposiums in our country. So that is the case. But the thing is, if you invest in research, right, then you can build the capital on that, of course. Then we have researchers, then we have research. We don't have a research culture at the moment. That is the issue. So once we start that, of course, then you have to reform our education system also much into that, of course. Now we are talking about for many years mismatch of the job market and the education. What we have done, we have not taken any meaningful step for that. So in most of the countries, more than 76 countries, introduced STEM education. Now we call it STEAM, Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, Mathematics, of course. So it is high time to think about this, and then you need at least 10 years to reform the entire sector. Then only you get at the top, then you will find researchers coming from grade 1 Because they know, then you must always introduce some kind of, now in our school system, of course, most of the students, they never ask questions. Even they ask questions, they ask to stop it and then take down notes and get ready for the exam. But this is not the case in other countries, especially the developed countries.
So this is also a question about the education system itself.
Definitely, it links, the education system directly links to the research culture of the country.
And we see world over, there's a massive transformation, massive revolution in terms of research development, especially surrounding this COVID-19 pandemic. And we know that come 2021, there'll be new developments, but what will Sri Lanka contribute with?
Yes, then that is why the people of this country elected His Excellency the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, because his policy statement welcomed by the people. And it's not a mere piece of paper. Some specialists, the university academics, the researchers, professionals, they got together and there were about 28 groups engaged with the preparation of this policy statement, right? So that is why, so it's, if we implement the policy statement of the President, if you need to adjust to the post-COVID situation, you can do that also. Then only you can drive this country where we are targeting within 5 years or 10 years. So by that time, of course, then you will be able to achieve all your targets. This is a difficult situation. I think after the independence, the next parliament they are facing the biggest challenge in the history. So then you need the people who has some knowledge, the education background, the professionalism and the skills to cope up the situation.
I'd also like to talk a little about the small and medium enterprises, the hardly hit not just by COVID-19 but also as a result of Easter tax. But even prior to that, we spoke about an informal sector, then about lack of policy again to protect these small and medium enterprises. They're actually a very important part of our economy. What is your view in terms of protecting them, especially in these changing and uncertain times?
Yeah, of course, now here you find thousands of entrepreneurs in the field of small and medium scale industries, of course. Then they need the support from the government. Now we have so many government institutions, IDB, EDB, and on the other hand ITI, SLSI, like that. There are so many governments, but all these institutions are in different places. Now EDB under one particular ministry, the ITI, SLSI under one particular ministry, the industries under one particular ministry. But I think after the formation of the new government under His Excellency the President, definitely all this will be under one umbrella. Then of course, then you can organize that particular ministry to cater to all the needs of the small and medium scale entrepreneurs. So they need capital at the moment. So when His Excellency the President took over the government, decided to give some tax relief to small and medium scale entrepreneurs. So even today, the opposition parties and some politicians criticize, then you lost the government revenue as a result of reducing the VAT and all that for small and medium term entrepreneurs. But on the other hand, of course, they were in a very bad situation before COVID-19. Most of them were in the crib, so they were not in a position to get a new loan to increase their capital and the investment. But that is why the government took steps to reduce the VAT, though the government lost some revenue. So, but unfortunately, after this COVID-19 situation, of course, over two months, especially including the capital, all 3 districts closed down. So then you find what happened to them. That is why the President took steps to give them the loans to rebuild their capital and their industries with 4% loan. But because of the delays, of course, President had to speak to the officials of the central bank. Now I think it's getting to the track at the moment, so it will take some time with the money supply to the system. Then of course they can revive their industries.
Right. I think I'd like to speak a little more about Colombo district as well as investments as a whole for the country, but after this break at Hyde Park. To stay with us. Welcome back. I'd also like to go back in time to talk a little about the infamous bond transaction, which is known as the bond scam here in Sri Lanka. Former Finance Minister Ravi Karunayaka, who was here at Hyde Park last week, he said he had nothing to do. It's just a myth, especially because the central bank and the relevant institutions were not under his purview. But however, my question is not about former Finance Minister Ravi Karunayaka, but the previous government's links with the transaction and also allegations against the former central bank governor who was under your regime. How are we going to manage these controversies and bring those culprits to book wherever there has been any mismanagement in terms of the country's finances?
After the 8th of January 2015, the presidential election, the UNP formed government with 46 members of parliament. We call it 100 days government. So that government, when they appoint their cabinet ministers, of course, then they separated central bank and the treasury to two. So central bank and the treasury, they were under one ministry for many years, of course. Then the central bank was under the Ministry of Planning and Economic Affairs, under the Prime Minister, then Prime Minister, and the Treasury was under then Finance Minister Mr. Ravi Karunayaka. So that is why he says, so bond scam, he has nothing to do with that because he was in charge of Treasury and other institutions under the Finance Ministry. So then they imported Arjuna Mahendran from Singapore, or he's a Singaporean citizen. So then he was appointed knowing that he is not even a dual citizen like in other cases. He is totally a Singapore citizen. So they appointed him here as the governor of the central bank. Then within a month, of course, then government treasury informed the central bank to raise funds to meet some transactions of the demand some around over 20 billion rupees by March. So then the central bank took steps to raise funds by issuing bonds, treasury bonds. These are not treasury bills. Treasury bonds, of course, 2025 is 30 years long term bonds. So then there was a practice that before that incident, of course, the central bank issued bonds not in public. So then they maintained the rate. But in this particular incident, of course, then Prime Minister advised the governor of the central bank to have auction. So then they went for the auction, then to issue 1 billion worth treasury bonds. And there were about over 28 primary dealers came for this auction. So then during the auction, of course, the Bank of Ceylon itself asked for 2 billion bonds, though there's a $1 billion to be sold. Then the perpetual treasuries, they themselves bid for 2 billion, and through Bank of Ceylon, another primary dealer, they bid another 5 billion at the last stage of the auction. So then they found the officials and the then governor. He went to that auction floor, and then he found there was a demand for 20.5 billion rupees. though there's a $1 billion. Then he asked the officials to increase it up to 20 billion, right? Then they said no, because they have mentioned only one. Then he insisted them to go for 10 billion. So then they went for 10 billion. Out of 10 billion, the perpetual treasuries, they managed to get over 5 billion Sri Lankan rupees bonds. So through this transaction, later it revealed the face of the transaction, nearly 11 billion rupees lost to the central bank. All these are ETF funds, the public funds utilized by these primary dealers and some officials of the country. So this is the total transaction.
But we are also talking about certain allegations against the previous government during which you were a minister, the regime under former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, where even the former Finance Minister Ravi Karnanayaka continued to say that the formula used to ascertain economic growth by the government was incorrect, and there are allegations of corruption, misappropriation of funds, and former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe stated that the former central bank governor was responsible for the sale of a staggering 2.7 trillion rupees worth of treasury bonds in 2012, 13 and 14 to accomplices of the previous regime. Now these are all again related to financial misappropriation or mismanagement and corruption. But how are we going to deal as a country? Because we see government after government there are allegations of corruption and controversy.
No, you can make allegations, but at the same time you need some substantial evidence to prove that. So actually from 2008, the treasury bonds issued by the central bank amounting to such vast amount of some trillions, but there are no Auditor General's report to make such allegations. So based on Auditor General's report. Normally the Parliament, when we meet the COPE, we go through Auditor General's report, and there Auditor General highlights some audit queries. Then only we go into that, of course. Even during the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe's regime, if there is such allegations against the previous regime, so he should have appointed the select committee in the Parliament or the special COPE committee and look into all these matters. After the forensic audit report presented in Parliament, then only they started making such allegations. But before that, the 2015 bond scam, of course, the Auditor General made clear, very clearly, he made his in his report mention the total amount lost to the Treasury and the central bank, so 10.5 billion. But there is no such allegations from the Auditor General from 2008 to 2015. So in that case, of course, because you must have some substantial Auditor General's report, but they are argument based on forensic audit report. But here we need our Auditor General's audit report to comment on that. That is my position about the allegations making by the former Finance Minister Ravi Karnanayaka and the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. But on the other hand, the 2015 bond scam, of course, we all know, because we followed the proceedings of the commission, presidential commission and all that. Then your other question is, now all this you have to apprehend all these culprits and frame charges against them. At the moment there is a High Court case, and the indictment served on 11 people, including the governor of the central bank. But unfortunately, the previous regime allowed him to leave the country. Why is that? So that is the issue. Now they say now it is the duty of the present government to bring him back, but he is not a citizen of Sri Lanka. So it's my position is it's a planned game. That is why they invited him to come here, knowing that he is not a citizen of Sri Lanka or the dual citizen, appointed him and tried to safeguard him in Parliament, in during the COPE committee proceedings and all that, by changing the members of COPE committee and all that. Everything revealed when the Presidential Commission proceeded, right? So therefore, I think 2015 bond scam is a planned one, right? So then I think it is the duty of the Attorney General to go into more details and see how the politicians, involvement of politicians of the previous regime, and frame charges against them.
We were talking about the mix. What kind of a mix we'll see in the new parliament? It could either be Ranil Wickremesinghe working as Prime Minister with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, or Mahinda Rajapaksa working as Prime Minister with Gotabaya Rajapaksa as the President.
I don't know, it will be GRMR government, right? Definitely that SLPP will achieve their targets.
How realistic is the expectation of repealing the 19th Amendment to the Constitution?
The 19th Amendment to the Constitution, of course, if you go to the original draft of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, the whole purpose of introducing the 19th Amendment to the Constitution is to curtail the powers of Executive President and transfer that power through commissions and to the Parliament and then to the Prime Minister. That was the whole purpose. But as a result, of course, now we have a president. We had a president with limited powers. If you consider the original Constitution, 1978. Then, on the other hand, none of the president or the Prime Minister, if they don't, they are not in good terms, of course. Then you find conflict always between the president and the Prime Minister. That is why we say, before amending the 19th Amendment to the Constitution with 2/3 majority, right, we have a President and the Prime Minister who can work together, right? But even that, of course, we need to...
But does this mean your camp would want to retain the 19th Amendment?
No, it doesn't mean that, of course, until the 19th Amendment is amended, right? Even at the moment, you have the President and the Prime Minister who can work together. But if you have a President and the Prime Minister in two different political parties and with two policies, of course, like last 4.5 years, nothing will be happening in the country.
In the scenario where, as you said, if it is an MR-GR government, will you all work to repeal the 19th Amendment?
It should be the combination in the country.
Will you work to repeal the 19th Amendment in
that
scenario?
Yes, of course. That is why we are targeting the 2/3 majority in the Parliament in the forthcoming election.
I think it's time we wrap up, Minister. That's all the time we had, but thank you very much for your time here at HydePark.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me for this HydePark.
Thank you. We had with us a former minister as well as Colombo district candidate for the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, Susil Premajayantha, joining us at HydePark. Thank you for watching. Good night.